Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Women in Whisky section of the Spirit of Yorkshire Virtual Open Day. I hope you've been enjoying all the stuff so far. I don't know how many people saw Amy and Morgan. Amy doing her excellent impression of being a Sunday brunch presenter and managing somehow to coordinate everything fantastically all at once. She was very impressive. And I wish I was that multi-talented, but unfortunately you've just got me sitting still talking to you. However, I am also going to be joined by three fantastic women who work in the industry. So right up here, oh, hello, you've got in the top left corner, you've got Elizabeth Barnby. Do you want to be Libby or Elizabeth? How formal are you feeling today, Libs?
It's the weekend, so we'll go for Libby.
Libby, super. So you've got Libby Barnby, who is, he does lots of the marketing here at the distillery. We've got Amy, can't think of his name, Teasdale.
Teasdale.
Where did that go? Amy Teasdale, who is one of our tour guides and baristas, but just kind of all-round excellent person here at the distillery. And then we're joined by Moa, who is known as the Swedish Whisky Girl. So in probably about 10 seconds each, everybody introduce yourself very quickly. Don't go into too much detail, because we'll be talking about that a bit later too. So Moa, you first, because you're not one of the gang. Go.
Yeah, sure. My name is Moa. I'm from Sweden. I like whiskey. I'm a girl and I do social media. So I thought the name Swedish Whisky Girl would be a great fit. So that's what I do at the moment.
Super. Over to you, Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm from Yorkshire in England, and I and I work here at the Spirit of Yorkshire as a barista and a tour guide. Like Jenni said, general all over really. You can find me in every area really.
Hello, my name is Libby. I was born and raised in Scotland, actually. Bit of an outsider, unfortunately. But I'm more Yorkshire than I am Scottish now. I've been here for about 13 years. I started working in Spirit Yorkshire about 3 years ago. I've started to do the marketing side of things. And yeah, I like to drink whiskey.
Cool. I'm Jenni. I'm the marketing director at the Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery, and if you've watched any of our Facebook things over the past couple of years, I'm sure you've seen me and heard me talk a lot about myself, so I won't bore anyone too much with that right now. So for this Women in Whisky session, we're going to be chatting to you until probably, for, I don't know, kind of half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. Feel free to ask any questions if you just bob them into the comments section underneath this video. If you're on Facebook, they'll come up, and Libby is coordinating and managing everything from an exceptionally cool looking setup up in the distillery office with various monitors and screens and keeping an eye on everything and being incredible at multitasking. So bob your question into there and she'll pose it at the relevant question at the relevant time in conversation. So if it doesn't get asked immediately, don't worry, she will have seen it. She'll just be waiting for the right section to ask it in. So we're going to frame this whole session under the banner of inspiration. And that is because it's very difficult to be what you can't see. And so we're going to talk about women in whiskey, and I think sort of 25 years ago this was even more of a pertinent topic. Now it's something that's really coming to the forefront, and people are working quite hard to make sure that there's a much more even gender split across the industry. And so we're going to be talking about inspiration, what made us want to work in the industry, why we think it's a great place to work, and the various people that inspired us, and with a bonus question at the end of what would our ideal whiskey be inspired by. And we're going to go a little bit bonkers in that. Sorry, I just dropped my pen. That's annoying. Anyway, I'm somewhere down underneath the distillery floor, so I don't think Dom's going to be very impressed with me too much. So the first kind of topic that we're going to be talking about is about who, what, and why were you inspired to dive into the industry. And so I'm going to pose that one to Moa to start with. What made you think Swedish Whisky Girl as opposed to Swedish Tequila Girl or Swedish Gin Girl or something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I currently live in Edinburgh in Scotland, and I've lived here for 5 years now. And I moved here to study professional dance. And I was very set on moving back to Scandinavia after my 3 years was done of training. But then I met a Scotsman, and the day after we went on our first date, he actually started working in the whiskey industry. And I've always had a fascination for flavours, and when he started bringing home some samples of whiskey to try, it was really interesting for me to kind of compare whiskeys, compare the flavours, and see where the flavours come from. I'd previously done a wine course, so just being able to look at production, look at the casks, look at kind of all the kind of climates and everything around it I am a very nerdy person, so it just suited me really well, I'd like to say. And then it's kind of the flavor, and as soon as you get into whiskey, you get to hear all these stories, and you get to meet the people who make the whiskey, and you get to hear their stories, and they've all very often have some incredible stories about drinking whiskey with people creating the whiskey, stories surrounding the industry, and that kind of storytelling aspect is what kind of hooked me into the world. So it was, I think also that is what really keeps me motivated and inspired to stay in the whiskey industry. And now I'm kind of branching into other spirits as well, just because my kind of passion for whiskey has developed to now wanting to expand horizons, especially when they're starting using other casks. So I feel like my nerdy little heart in whiskey can now branch out to all these subcategories, and I don't feel like I have enough time to go into everything. But when it comes to kind of inspired me, then of course Cody, my boyfriend, inspired me because he is also quite a nerdy person. He started talking about it in just this kind of normal way that is just focusing on the flavor, not on the status of it or anything like that. And then when we've met people, it's been all the people that's inspired me. And especially I think it is something that I now can do with my dad, because my dad loves whiskey and he's loved it for ages. And I've always thought they all tasted the same. So I think when I came home, I was like, do you know what? I like whiskey and I'm going to probably do a little bit more of this. I think he was just thrilled.
Excellent. Okay, now I've got some notes because you've said a couple of really fascinating things, but I'm going to come back to those later, especially when it comes to talking about Yorkshire Day, which I have here, which is our special edition whiskey that is currently available for pre-order, I believe, and is in honour of the fact that the 1st of August is Yorkshire Day. But we'll come back to that later. So, Libby, over to you. Tell us, you said you're Scottish born and raised, but also Brid through and through. So how do those two things match together?
Yes, so I suppose I started when I was from 16 to around about 18. I used to work in a fish and chip shop. Got bored of the fish and chip shop and found a job at a distillery. I'd never really gone into whiskey as such. Obviously, I tried a few bits, but this is swearing in this place, the famous Grouse and Jack Daniels, and all the teenage whiskey, shall we say. I won't even say what I mixed it with either. So from that, I obviously started to learn the tours and things like that. So I was working in the cafe, working in the shop, and then, as I say, learning the tours. And I kind of just threw myself at the deep end. I found a real passion for it and talking about it, especially, and showing people around and all that jazz. And then, obviously, my Scottish heritage, Robert Burns. So I'd only really been at this story about 6 months. And I went to the whiskey director, Joe, and I said, Joe, let's do a Burns night. Let's do a Yorkshire twist Burns night. And he said, do you know what, Libby? If you organise it, tickets on sale, blah, 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 great. So, you know what? I came into work the next day and I had it completely organised. I was like, right, we'll do a Burns night. So that's what we did. So I suppose, realistically, if you think about it, Robert Burns was my inspiration. He was the guy that pushed me into events, and that's now my passion. I love the events, and I say talking about whiskey, talking to people about whiskey, the conversation, as I say, the events. Drinking whiskey is also a great one. So yeah, I'd say probably my Scottish side did have a massive impact of it, and I suppose especially my stepmom. She was born and raised in Scotland. She has the accent. I don't. As I say, a lot more Yorkshire than Scottish these days. But yes, I suppose that Burns is to blame for us doing a Burns night every year. This no, from now on. So yeah, that's about it.
Fab. And you know what? The Burns night is one of the most successful things that we do. So Libby is a superstar for doing that, and she's continued to keep organising them. And she drags her dad in to come and do the toasts and things like that. So it becomes a proper family affair, which is quite a lot of what the distillery is about. Anyway, right, Amy, on to you, because I think yours is a bit different.
Yeah. So I started within this whole thing. I kind of came in here in the beginning as a barista, so that's making coffees. It's kind of a similar thing to Mo, really. I've always kind of been interested in flavour. So when my sort of background is, my very first job was glass collecting in like a nightclub, and then I kind of that didn't do it for me anymore. And then when I was old enough, I kind of wanted to be on the bar and learning about all these different drinks that you could kind of have. And then kind of from there went on to doing sort of more cocktail-y kind of things and working in a cocktail bar. And then coffee got me. So I've always been interested in flavour, really. So like I said, my sort of main job here was through the coffee shop, really. And then a similar thing to Libby, I kind of got learning about the tours and was kind of wanting to see what was going on there. And I mean, whiskey's always been kind of in the background because it was sort of my granddad. It always kind of reminds me of my granddad. So I always kind of associate whiskey, you know, with that kind of memory. So it's always held sort of a special place for me, really, anyway. So it just kind of seemed a perfect fit, really, to make coffee in a whiskey distillery. And then I quite like people, and I love, talking to people and teaching people the kind of stuff, anything I can teach people, I will do. And then, I kind of got involved in the tours, learned all the ins and outs of everything that there is to know about how we make our whiskey here. And it kind of evolved from there. And then I started getting involved in, some of the events and things. So it's really exciting. So inspiration-wise, I kind of, rather than it be like a specific person, I'm kind of more inspired by what we're achieving as a young whiskey distillery, that inspires me and sort of motivates me to push us, to push ourselves forward and really sort of grow with the business. That's really inspiring to me. And everyone here, everyone's absolutely fantastic. Libby's fantastic. She inspires me all the time because she does an absolutely fantastic job. Half the stuff she's doing today I probably wouldn't even be able to look at, honestly.
My head's growing.
So, yeah, exactly. But do you know what I mean? So it's like everyday people, kind of a similar thing to Mo, within the whiskey industry, it's becoming a lot more inclusive where women are concerned. And it's exciting to be part of something that's up and coming, if you like. We are just starting out, and so it's really inspiring moving forward, where we can be in the next sort of 10 years, really. So
Cool. So I think the nice thing about that actually is that basically everybody's come in from a slightly alternative angle, and it's interesting to know that no one was like, right, ever since I've been old enough to drink, possibly even before, all I've wanted to do is drink whiskey, and it's been part of who I am, etc. And I think that's quite a useful thing for people outside of the industry to know, is that you don't have to be a whiskey lover, you don't have to know the intricacies of a Glendronach from 1962 and the difference between that and something else from 1982, and like all of those kinds of intricate details, which are fantastic and are definitely a crucial fabric to the whiskey industry, but can feel quite intimidating at times as well. So that my intro is much more nepotistic than any of you guys, but I grew up on the farm in which, where we grow all the barley for Spirit of Yorkshire. Tom, one of the co-founders, is my dad, but I do have purpose. I'm not just here because of him. But I just moved off to London as soon as I'd finished my degree, and I went and worked in advertising for 10 years or 8 years, and got onto a grad scheme and did all of those kinds of things. And then when I sort of felt like the time was right to come home and start a family, and I was also missing the countryside, missing the beach, a bit fed up with living in South London, all of those sorts of things moved together, and I came and started working for the distillery. So I do feel like I've got something to bring to the table other than just blood. And so I think that's interesting as well. For me, it's fascinating. Moa talked about the storytelling angles of whiskey, and I think that's really interesting in that there's so many things. It's all about the artistry and the creativity, and it's sometimes the whiskey is a sort of a very nice after product of it. Sometimes it's the be all and end all, and there's so much more about the industry and about the creation of whiskey as a product than just the whiskey itself that sits in that bottle. What do you guys think about that? Libby, do you want to put us all on the screen and we can have a bit of a chat?
Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it's quite interesting when you do start talking to people, when you will all know, when you go to these kind of whiskey events, you kind of get chatting to people, and there is lots of stories, like Moa said, coming through, and sometimes they're sort of really relatable, and it is sort of really sort of accessible, and I think people don't realize until they're actually in it. Definitely, I would definitely agree with that, Jenny, 100%. Yeah.
Something that was mentioned just after the Yorkshire Day was released, and David's wife, Beck, sent a massive long email to the whiskey director, Joe, about how this new Yorkshire Day release made her feel. It brought her right back to childhood memories. I'm not entirely sure what else the email said, but he came into work and said, I got an amazing email off Beck last night, David. And he was like, oh, right. Oh. So, even that's bringing in stories and things like that. Another thing, Jenni, when we went to the York Whiskey Festival, there was that gent, do you remember, who got a little bit upset And he was talking
Yes.
about his friend who unfortunately passed away, and he would have loved this whiskey, and it really meant a lot to this guy that we were there screaming about Yorkshire whiskey, because his friend would have absolutely loved it, which is, again, it's amazing to think that our product can do that to someone, you know. So it's really, really, what's the word? Emotional.
Yeah.
And emotive, I think, is a nice one. We got a fantastic letter just after we'd released Filey Bay for the first time from someone who talked about his granddad and how they always came on holiday to Filey Bay and stayed in a caravan at Reeton and would walk along the sands, and he was just so sad that his granddad missed out on seeing it. And so it's not just about the whiskey, though that is obviously the crucial component, but the name really brought back memories. We've done quite a lot with the sort of tactility of the bottle and how it looks and how it feels to try and like bring everything about the place that we're at into it. I mean, you can see it on the roundel there in the bottom of the screen, with the kind of the waves in the field, the waves in the thing, the gannet flying in the sky, all of those sorts of things. Okay, so if we move on to the next bit, which is about kind of inspirations as women in the industry. So we talked about kind of what got us into the industry, but I guess who are the women that keep us here, that stop us just deciding to go off and do something else? So I think maybe let's start with Amy this time.
Ooh, that's a really difficult one, because there's so many amazing women within the industry, honestly. But I think the first one that really just jumped to mind is obviously going to be Becky Paskin. You know, she's done a great deal for women within the industry. You know, she's, fighting the fight. She has her that little her own is it Our Whiskey, the whole whiskey platform that she has is fantastic, you know, to teach women and help women feel more like comfortable, because I know sometimes whiskey can be daunting anyway as a general, and I think it's nice to be a woman teaching people. I know when I do the tours and stuff, I get a lot of women who come and are just like, I'm really only here because he's here, and then by the end of it they're like, oh my goodness, you know, I can't wait to actually go and try some of my own. I'm going to get my friends together and we're going to go and do a little tasting session and do our own kind of thing. So that's what really kind of keeps me on the level, if you like, as you know, a woman, you know, because it is a lot more inclusive, I guess, than it used to be. But yeah, Becky Paskin probably would be the first thing that jumped to my mind. An obvious one, but that would be mine, definitely.
Okay, and then so Moa, I'm sure you've inspired a few people yourself, but who inspires you?
I mean, it's such an interesting question, because there's so many women in the industry, and I think people forget about this because it's been such a trendy thing, this whole women in whiskey thing, that women has been involved in whiskey making for ages. So it's just one of those things, like, who do you go for? Do you go for Leslie, for Troy? One of my first days, I actually started working with whiskey and whiskey tourism. The next day I met Angela Dorazio from Macmira, and she inspires me because she does such creative things with whiskey. And for her, every time I've spoken to her, she doesn't make it difficult. For her, it's just all about flavor, and then if you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. It doesn't have to be difficult or complicated, and I really like that about her. And I think in the whiskey industry, I've seen these kind of trends that people are kind of trying to be a little bit nitpicky or snobby, or putting people into brackets of whatever. So I just like when it's quite straightforward, it's just friendly and welcoming. So I would probably say her if I had to choose just one.
Oh yeah, we're all muted. That'll be why.
There we go. Sorry.
I was like,
background noise. I'd put everyone on mute and then I messed that up. Sorry. Right, Libby, now we can hear you. Go for it.
If I'm completely honest, I'd probably say the girls here. The Spirit of Yorkshire would not be Spirit of Yorkshire without the girls that we have here, because the majority of our staff are girls. The cafe, the shop. I think mainly, like, from what I've learned through whiskey, I probably learned the most from Chrissy, who is the tour queen. Her diagrams of the stills to help us learn, and honestly, if I don't know a question, I go to Chrissy. She's the woman. So I'd maybe say, yeah, just us as a team. The girls here are amazing. We really are a family, even though, you know, everyone asks, is it a family-run business? Are you part of the family? Well, yeah, I suppose I am. I suppose we all are. You know, it's a really, really nice team. I think we're all incredibly lucky to have such a good team. But yeah, I mean, if I had to pick someone, it'd probably be Chrissy, who works here, because she pretty much taught me the majority that I know. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's really nice.
Yeah.
And also, she is called Chrissy Queen, so she literally is the tall
Is
queen.
the queen.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that is
Literally.
to explain the joke for everybody
I mean,
else.
she
Yeah,
has
that is
just
her
got
thing.
married, so technically she's Mrs.
Yeah,
Robinson.
but that doesn't count.
Yeah, but I think she said Queen was much more exciting than Robinson. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just, I guess I'm sort of forgetting that we're not just chatting within ourselves. We're actually, there's people watching. So if there's anybody would like to put anything onto the comment section about kind of what they think about it. I think we've made some interesting points about how sometimes it can feel a bit kind of a bit snobbish, and sometimes people nitpick. I think that's a really good point, Moa. And you look at some of the Facebook groups that I'm part of about whiskey, and some of the level of detail is both magical and fantastic, but also quite divisive and can get quite heated and a bit angry, and there's often a place for that, but often there's not. So I think there's something really interesting about that. So if anyone's got any comments or anything that they want to bob in, then that's great. I think for me, I'm going to sort of step away slightly from whiskey just into the wider alcohol spectrum. But there's people like Claire at Welbeck. She runs Welbeck Brewery, and she is totally wonderful and just absolutely brilliant. And when I first met her, I was like, can you be my friend? I'd really like you to be my friend. And luckily she's friends with my sister, so we get to see her quite a lot. And World Top does quite a lot with Welbeck, so it's really lovely, and they come and share quite a bit. But she runs the brewery. She's also, in the time of having the brewery and running it, she has had 2 kids, so she's taken time off for mat leave, and I think that's really important too, is to be able to see that you can work in quite a small industry and still be proving a point and changing and breaking barriers and changing things, but you can still take time off when you need to for your family and for whatever reason. And for me especially, that's been quite a good eye-opener for this year, and it definitely helped me decide that I wanted to take a bit of time off this year to spend time with my children in a way that I didn't necessarily when I had my first child. So there's lots there, I think, that can help. So it's always good to look inside and to look outside, and I'm sure there's so many hidden people within the whiskey industry who we just have no idea about, but who are like turning all the cogs and creating whiskey and making it the fantastic industry that it is. I think back to one of the first tours I ever did at Glendrona, and the lady that took us around there, and she just knew everything, a bit like Chrissy even, but she'd obviously been doing it for decades, and she was just fab, and she knew everything. And I was asking her about water and about barley, and she could just answer the questions in a way that then doing another tour at another distillery with a guy who was much younger, he just had no idea. You just ask a question about something, and you see that we just totally floored him. So it's that kind of thing is interesting. And the other people that I love are seeing the girls who drive, who are leading corn in the middle of harvest. So all that thing about the people who help kind of go back and forth between combines, bringing in the barley before it even goes to the maltsters, before it even thinks about becoming whiskey. I think there's definitely a shout out to the sort of the women who just did define that industry as well. So actually time is ticking away with us.
It is.
Where was I going to go next with this one? It was going to be about, so if you could make a whiskey inspired by anything, what would it be? And don't say, oh, well, there's a lovely old peated cask or like anything like that. I want everyone to think slightly bonkers. Go well away from it. So I think, like, could it be inspired by, I don't know, the smell of autumn leaves? That's a bit poetic, but you know what I mean. Like, could it be inspired by something else? And then, and kind of maybe have 2 minutes to think on that. And I'll just do a quick plug for Yorkshire Day, which is, I think it's going to be backwards on here because of how, oh no, it's not, it's fine. So this is our newest special release. It's incredibly delicious and very Moorish, and I'm having to remind myself about not drinking too much of it too quickly. But it's one of our special releases. It's very limited in numbers. It's 55%. It is Oloroso casks with bourbon this year, whereas last year, bourbon, I always say it wrong, I'm too much biscuits. Whereas last year it was PX, I believe. So it's a really different flavour and really different taste from last year. Well done, Libby. Here we go. You've got all the information on there. And in fact, I'll hand it over to Libby. You've done all the work on it. You tell everybody how to buy it and where to go.
Yeah, so I can pop a link in the comment section, and you can buy it if you haven't already got it. If you've been tasting it throughout the day, that's amazing. We sent you some, Moa, didn't we? What did you think to the Yorkshire Day?
Yeah, really nice. I'm actually sipping it right now. I was like, oh, no one's looking at me. I'm just gonna. It's really nice. It has this lovely richness. It's viscous, and it's not woody or too dry, but it still has all these lovely rich flavors I really enjoy.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned, well, it's been mentioned quite a lot with the word fruitcake.
Yeah.
The main point for Yorkshire 2021. But yeah, I totally agree. Great without water, great with water, really good. And it's had an amazing response as well. I think some of the fans absolutely love it. So it's great. So I think everyone's had a thought on.
Yeah, everyone had time to think about.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
I can go
Okay,
first.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
No,
Lily's
an idea.
Ooh, she's confident. Go.
So I would probably, because I love black currants. It's I have a few flavors. Or like these are my favorite flavors, and it's elderflower and it's black currants, among some others. But I'm thinking because my grandma has these lovely blackcurrant bushes where she lives, I would call it like grandma's whiskey, and then have a black, like homemade blackcurrant cordial that you could season casks with. Probably first with like bourbon because that's my other favorite like cask type. So you season them with that, and then mature the whiskey in these, so you get this kind of blackcurrant whiskey first filled bourbon yumminess. I think would just sounds great. So what could go wrong?
That sounds outstanding. I think that's also highly dangerously drinkable.
Yes.
Yeah, and I like the level of detail you went into with that. Like, just really, like, so I gave you like 2 minutes to think on it, and you've come out with something fantastic. It's okay, so blackcurrant, inspired by your grandma, and blackcurrant and elderflower. Honestly, that sounds so good. Okay, cool. Right, Libby, you're up next. What do you think? What would you go for?
So I've had a little bit of thought, and it's nowhere near as good as Noah's. But I'd probably, I've been thinking about this for quite a while. It's one of the questions that comes up, like, oh, would you start your own distillery? I'm like, I'd love to start my own distillery, but it's what it costs. But what would I call a distillery that's like part Yorkshire, part Scottish? Do you know what I mean? So in between, because as I say, I like I'll always tell people that I was born and raised in Scotland because I'm quite proud of it. But as I say, I'm definitely more Yorkshire than I am Scottish these days. So I'd do some sort of Yorkshire Scottish thing. So whether that's I suppose Yorkshire.
Yorkish.
I have no idea. I'd maybe try and blend the two somehow. And I suppose I'm a perfect example of that. I'm a perfect example of the blend of Yorkshire and Scotland. So I'd make a Libby dram.
Perfect.
That's
interesting.
Which is it should be enjoyed when people are laughing, because if anyone knows me, I'm always laughing, always smiling. So something that should be enjoyed, as I say, yeah, in the company of friends, a big laugh, which I think at the moment is amazing, because we've missed everyone so much that when you get to see friends now without a mask on, sat in the pub or whichever, is really, really good fun. And I think actually lockdown helped me a lot to get out and never say no to a night out again, even if I'm drinking water because I've got work the next day. So yeah, just something that you can easily enjoy with friends and a smile. The Libby dram. There we go.
Libby dram. I love that, and I feel like there'd be like a healthy like mix of some pretty heavy emo music somewhere.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I was listening
to put U-Mate 6 on there.
Yeah, I was going to say it has to be that. I was listening to the playlist that we put together last year over lockdown. For those who don't know, we alongside the brewery, we put together a big Spotify playlist that is big. I think it's about 6 or 7 hours or something now, and everyone suggested tracks for it and talked about why they wanted to do it. And it was just a really nice way of doing it, and it is wacky when you listen to it. So you've got like Tom's Jazz with, then I was listening to it the other day, just had it on in the car, and then like suddenly Paramore came bounding out, and then you mean, I was like, this is Libby is heavily involved in this one. So that was I quite enjoyed that. Anyway, on to Amy. So sorry, yeah, are you going to be less narcissistic than Libby?
Absolutely. I've literally not given them
a Libby dram.
I haven't given it as much thought as that. Mine's literally, if I could make a whiskey that could potentially give me all of the feelings of having a day at the beach with family and friends, then that would be it. So, like you've got your donut kind of flavors, those kind of donuts, ice cream, candy floss, those kind of things. that all encompassed in a whiskey would probably be what I would go for, honestly, so that it would really spark off that day at the beach with family and friends when you were little, you know, that kind of flavour I think would be good for a whiskey. Short and sweet, there you go.
That sounds perfect. That sounds exactly like what you might imagine a Filey Bay whiskey to be.
Exactly.
So yeah, something donuts on Cobble Landing. I feel like is a great one for that one. Okay, right. I guess mine. The heat wave last week. I mean, I'm quite gutted that today it is just raining non-stop, and it feels like the heat wave is just a distant memory that we just never knew about ever again. Moa, you're in Edinburgh, so I imagine it is also raining with you because it's always raining in Edinburgh, and. It's so drizzly, but one of my favourite things is driving around like country lanes when it's really hot and sunny. So maybe actually a couple of weeks back, thinking about with all the cow parsley out, all those smells, the elderflower, you're spotting some red campion, all of these different bits and bobs that are coming in, and it just kind of overwhelms the senses, as well as this kind of dry, dusty, it's like mud. Then when it gets into later in summer and you've got the combine smell and you can literally smell the fact that it's harvest and things. I think if you could like bottle that, I mean, I know harvest is basically bottled into being whiskey anyway, but it's just that sort of thing. And it just reminds me of being kind of a teenager and running errands for mum and dad and driving around lanes and not really having much to do apart from sort of being useful by doing some driving, and that's about it. And I think that would be a fantastic thing to manage to bottle and to put in just the general carefreeness of being 17. If only we could go back to that. Anyway, we've got a question that's come in, and it's from this guy, Dan, and he says, was there a specific whiskey that got you interested in the industry? So I'm going to put that one out to Amy, because she's having to think about it. I'm going to really put it on the spot. Amy, you go first. Was there a specific whiskey that got you into the industry?
Not really, honestly. It was kind of just the whole smell of whiskey that kind of drew me in, like I say, because it was the smell of whiskey that kind of got me first off, because like I say, it was something I associate with my granddad, you know, so it wasn't a specific one. I do believe he was a Knockantoshan kind of person, but that's not necessarily the one that got me into it, I guess. I suppose it could be in a way because it was what he used to drink, so we'll go with that one.
Fab. Right, over to you, Libby.
Because I only really started properly drinking whiskey within Spirit of Yorkshire, 001, I suppose it's not actually a whiskey, the maturing malt, 001 has been my favourite all the way through, really. Really, really good one. If I had to pick a whiskey, it would be a whiskey that's probably my favourite outside of Filey Bay, which is Glenrothes 18-year-old PX. Expensive bottle, still asking for one for my birthday. This is about the first year now that I'm asking. But that would probably be the one, yeah.
Right, I'm getting some very not subtle reminders from Joe that we've gone over our time, and then
right,
it's 5:05 and we need to stop. So, just pointing at a clock in the background. So, I'm going to go with mine is a long roast Springbank that I had at Milrose a few years ago, and it was absolutely delicious. And I was like, yeah, this is the stuff for me. So, with no further ado, because we have to stop. But thank you so much.
What was Moa's?
Oh, sorry, Moa. Gosh, that was so stupid. Right, Moa, go quickly.
Mine's fast. The first whiskey I liked was an Ard Big Ten, so I would have to say that.
Good. Great, strong choice there. I'm sure. Okay, well, with no further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Moa. Thank you so much for everybody who joined us.
Yeah, it's been fun.
A fair few eyeballs been watching it, according to my screen. So thank you very, very much. We hope you've enjoyed the rest of the Spirit of Yorkshire Day. Yorkshire Day, our special release is now available for 2021 online. There's a link in the comment section that Libby's bobbed in. And have a lovely, if somewhat rainy, Saturday evening.
Yeah.
Oh, what's coming in next, Libby? Quick.
What's that?
What's coming in next? Quick plug.
Distilling with Dom, our distiller.
Fab.
Amazing.
Okay, right.
All right.
Learn about distilling. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.